Hello, XCFL. It's your boy, Big Al, and I'm back with another Bolt Beat for the Chargers covering weeks 5 through 8. This covers the weeks, as I mentioned, 5 through 8, which we've played um, the, the Broncos, the Chiefs, and the Steelers, and then our bye week was week 8. So, moving on from that, we're going to go ahead and talk about the Chargers as they stand right now. They're still an 86 overall team. They're 4 and 3 at this current spot, coming into the Week 8 bye. Their offense is ranked 14th in the XCFL currently right now, and the defense is ranked 24th in the XCFL. On the offensive side, they're 13th in points, they're 13th in yards, 13th in passing yards, and 11th in rushing yards. So they're pretty much above average right now for the offense in the XCFL. The defense is still struggling a little bit. Their 24-point average is 15th in the XCFL right now. Their yardage is 29th. Their passing yardage is 31st, and their rushing yards is 21st. So they are holding their own, but not as they should. That defense should be a little bit better than it is right now, and so should the offense. We'll see how they do coming out of the bye week. They go and play against their division rival, the Broncos. Then they have the Ravens coming up on week 10. Week 11 will be Coach Doss and the Raiders, and then the Chiefs again after that. Another divisional matchup there. We'll get into those games on the next Bolt Beak, covering weeks 9 through 12. All right, as I mentioned earlier, we're currently in the week 8 bye week, moving into week 9 against the Broncos, which I just finished up earlier tonight. But taking a look at the rest of the schedule, as I just mentioned a moment ago, we face the Broncos tonight. We have the Ravens next week on the week 10. Week 11, we have the Raiders. Week 12, we have Kansas City. Week 13, we have the Jaguars. Week 14, back with Oakland. Week 15 with the Buffalo Bills. Week 16 with the Giants, and the last week of the season against the Browns. That'll finish up our regular season for this year. We'll see if we can make it into the playoffs. It's a tight race in the AFC West currently right now, as I know as it stands, and we are in week 9. Myself and the Broncos are now tied at 4 and 4, and Coach Doss and the Raiders are at, I believe he is 4 and 3. But currently at this time during the Bolt Beat, weeks 5 through 8, we're showing the standings. I was in first place at 4 and 3. The Raiders were 3 and 3. The Broncos were 2 and 3. They were going through new ownership changeover, and the Chiefs are still, I believe, winless at this point, 0 and 7 during these weeks. So moving on, we're going to go ahead and discuss the games that I had during this week. I faced off the old Broncos owner earlier in week 5, so we'll go ahead and recap 5, 6, and 7, and of course, as I mentioned, week 8 was our bye week, so stay tuned for that. All right, Chargers fans, we kicked things off with the week 5 against the Broncos at home, which was Friday at 7:30 p.m. We took the victory on this one, 28-21, at home versus the old Broncos owner. Standouts for the Broncos was Dobbs, Lane, Taylor, and Miller. For the Chargers, you had the Watson and Gordon, Hobbs, and Bigby. We'll go ahead and take a look at those stats now. For the Broncos, Josh Dobbs was 15 of 21, 241 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Halfback Lane had 12 rushes for 51 yards and 1 touchdown. Taylor, wide receiver, had 4 receptions for 94 yards and 1 touchdown. Von Miller also had 4 tackles for a loss and 1 sack in that one. Quarterback for the Chargers, Watson, was 18 of 22 for 215 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Gordon had 20 carries for 113 yards, no touchdowns. Tight end Hobbs had 4 receptions for 42 yards and a touchdown. And Bigby on the defensive side for the Chargers had 2 tackles for a loss. One of those was a forced fumble. Next up, we had a game versus the Chiefs. We went to the Chiefs. We took a win in this one, 41-24 on the road in Kansas City. Big-time game for Watson, Gordon, Williams, and Bosa. For the Chiefs, Mahomes, Hunt, Hill, and Peters. We'll go ahead and take a look at those stats in this game in Week 6 versus the Chiefs. The Chargers, Watson was 20 of 26 for 357 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Gordon had 10 carries for 48 yards and 0 touchdowns. Williams had 6 receptions for 88 yards and 2 TDs. Bosa had 4 tackles for a loss with 1 sack. On the Chiefs side for the stats, Mahomes was 20 of 33 for 299 yards. He had 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. Hunt had 13 carries for 21 yards and 0 touchdowns. Hill had 5 receptions for 62 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Peters had 4 tackles for a loss and 1 interception. In our last active week during this stretch, week 7 was against the Commissioner and the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Chargers come out with the victory in a close one here of 31-24. Standouts for the Chargers was Watson, Gordon, Ross, and Franklin. For the Steelers, you had Rudolph, Bell, Smith-Shooter, and Shazier, of course. Stats on this one for the Chargers: Watson was 10 of 15 for 124 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. Gordon had 14 carries for 121 yards and 1 touchdown. Ross had 4 receptions for 64 yards and a touchdown. Franklin had 5 tackles for a loss. 1 was a forced fumble. For the Steelers, quarterback Rudolph, who was put in later on in the game in replace of Roethlisberger, he went 11 of 14 for 154 yards, had 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions. Bell had 13 carries for 63 yards and 0 touchdowns. Smith-Schuster had 8 receptions for 114 yards and 0 touchdowns. And Shazier had 2 tackles for a loss, including 2 sacks, and 1 interception. That takes care of the weeks 5 through 7. As I mentioned, we went into the bye week for week 8. We'll go ahead and discuss some bye week topics here in just a minute. All right, fans, so that brings us to the bye week, week 8, which we all hate. No action, nothing's going on. It was pretty dead. Just a quick note to talk about at this current time, as we sat in the playoff race in the AFC, you have the Browns, who are 5-1 currently. They're 2-0 in the division. They're 4-1 in the conference. The Tennessee Titans are 4-1 as well. They're also 2-1 in their division and 3-1 in the conference. Myself was sitting third at this point at 4-3. We were 2-0 in the division and 3-1 in the conference. The Jets, surprisingly, have moved up from the basement. They were 4-3 at this point. They're 2-2 in the division and 3-3 in the conference. The Ravens are also at 5-1. They were 2-1 in their division and 4-1 in the conference. And then you have the Houston Texans and Coach Boone, who's 4-2, 3-0 in the division and 3-1 in the conference. Those teams on the bubbles as they sit right now. Again, this is covering weeks 5 through 8 for the Bolt Beat. You had the Bengals, who were 4-2, the Steelers, who were 3-3, the Jaguars, who were 4-2, and the Raiders, who were 3-3, rounding out the top 10 in the AFC playoff race. Well, you heard the buzzer. That's all I got for you now at this time. So that covers everything for the Chargers Bolt Beat week 5 through 8. We'll go ahead and see you next time when we cover weeks 9 through 12.